Hey folks, before we get started today, just a quick thank you for listening, first of all. And second of all, if you really like what you hear, we would really appreciate a subscription from you by just hitting that subscribe button and leaving a rating or review for us to let us know how we're doing pretty much. And if you do so, if you leave a review, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. I might even read it verbatim. Who knows? Okay, anyway, on with the show. Welcome to the Film Nuts Podcast. I'm your host, Taylor D. Adams. There are plenty of movies out there about the horrors possible with technology. Terminator, 2001: A Space Odyssey, almost every episode of Black Mirror. But today we're discussing a film where technology is at the center of a love story. Spike Jonze presents Her, a story about a lonely writer, played by Joaquin Phoenix, who develops an unlikely relationship with an operating system, voiced by Scarlett Johansson. Part rom-com, part social commentary, this is a film with a ton of heart, even if the initial premise instinctually conjures up some uncomfortable feelings. Her was suggested by this week's guest, director and editor Scott Simerly, whose latest short film, Alien Guy Tim, garnered dozens of awards on the festival circuit and is now available free to watch on Vimeo. Scott originally connected with this film over its depiction of loneliness, but being the filmmaker that he is, he fell in love with more than just the story. From the beautiful color palette to the emotional score, Scott has rewatched this movie over and over again. So, we hope you enjoy listening. Here's Scott Simerly talking about Her on the Film Nuts Podcast.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. How are things in LA?
It's such like a back and forth, man. Like, I mean, it's not surprising that they're like shutting everything down again. Like, obviously this is unprecedented, but nobody can really like decide what to do, it seems. And so it's been a problem.
Yeah, we just our governor just put out a mandatory mask order for the state, I think last week. So
Okay.
Hopefully people start to get a grip.
Well, yeah, I was getting worried for y'all. I was talking with my family because like they kind of say like North Carolina hasn't really had like a first wave, basically. They've had obviously cases, but not like this second wave is like there, and like Arizona and Texas it's kind of their first wave coming.
Yeah, it feels like that we've just had the first wave has lasted 6 months. Like that. Right. That's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah, man.
But anyway,
so weird.
Moving on to other things. So Alien Guy Tim's been getting a lot of pub recently. Tell me about it, man. Tell me about the film, and then tell me about how it's been received.
Yeah, so Alien Guy Tim, it's a mockumentary. It's all about a guy who goes by the name Alien Guy Tim on Instagram and social media, and he claims to have been abducted by aliens, but encounters a lot of problems along the way. He gets followed. It's a fun style because obviously we did the mockumentary style, as I said, and the crew follows him around and tries to figure out, is this guy crazy? Is he delusional, or is he actually telling the truth? And yeah, we've been very fortunate. I mean, I feel even more fortunate now with everything going on in the world because we shot it like last March, finished it pretty quickly in post, and then pretty much did like a year of the festival run. And we had like a lot of success, won some awards, and then now, of course, we actually ended up releasing it on Vimeo. It felt like it was a good time after doing a year of festival runs, but also because of now, like festivals are kind of, at least in-person festivals, are non-existent.
So that's awesome, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it too. I enjoyed watching. I thought it was a lot of fun to see. What kind of what sparked that idea?
So Patrick McElroy, my like frequent filmmaking collaborator and a really good friend, he's the writer, producer, and lead actor, and I directed, produced, and edited Alien Guy Tim. He had started a character with his brother Rory. It was this Alien Guy Tim guy. It was based on like the Ancient Aliens show. I don't know if you've ever watched that.
Yeah.
So yeah, like some of those characters there, and some of the very interesting people. And so he went with this voice, this very distinct voice, as you know, and as people can see in the film. And yeah, he started doing an Instagram character, these selfie videos, and he was like, hey, like saying all these crazy things about this like alien girlfriend named Cindervis 9 and stuff like that. And people started messaging him on Instagram being like, hey man, is this for real? Is this or is this just a character? And so we kind of had a meeting one time discussing, like, we really wanted to make a short, and we really wanted to do it with an actual budget. And I asked him, like, what about this character? And we just sort of went from there. We kind of came up with the idea, and we're like, mockumentary would be fun because you literally open the movie, like with his face just staring straight at you.
Hmm.
And so you're already in this like awkward man's world instantly. And so I think, yeah, we just kind of we spawned it from there, and we were very fortunate. Did Seed and Spark crowdfunding, and were able to raise enough money to pay our cast and crew, and then have enough to like do the festivals and all that. So yeah, it's been a really great process for sure. It was a great short. We're very proud of.
So it started out as an Instagram account, basically.
Yeah, pretty
That's
much.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't even know. Funny enough, I like it said like suggested friends, and I was like, who is this guy? And I thought it was Alan at first. I was like, who is Alan Guy Tim? And why is Pat's picture in his profile?
Yeah.
And then I asked him, and he was like, oh yeah, that's like this character I'm starting. And then he started doing the videos, and our friends loved it, of course. And then like yeah, strangers started messaging him, like I said, and so yeah, it just kind of spawned from there.
That's awesome. Well, going from kind of that science fiction realm, if you will, you wanted to talk about Her.
Yeah.
Tell me why.
Uh, it's definitely a movie that I've rewatched probably more than yeah, I don't know. It's probably one of the most rewatched movies that I've seen over and over again. And it really and like it's funny you bring that up about the sci-fi, because I feel like I'm not a big sci-fi person. Like
Hmm.
I don't think I watch that many films from the genre, but I think of somewhat like maybe like sci-fi adjacent, you might call it, because obviously, like as you know, with Alien Guy Tim, like yeah, this is a strange alien guy, but it's more of just a story of this like loner and this guy trying to like prove that he's not crazy. And I think Her really struck me because it is very similar in that regard. Like obviously there's sci-fi, there is this operating system that he's talking to all the time,
Hmm.
but that yeah, that he is still this man like struggling with, just getting out of a marriage and trying to like form a relationship. And so I think I've always moved towards that with like movies I enjoy, of like kind of this loner person trying to make their way in the world and trying to, improve and come out on top.
Would you like your OS to have a male or female voice?
Female, I guess.
How would you describe your relationship with your mother?
That was fine, I think. Well, actually, I think the thing I always found frustrating about my mom is, if I tell her something that's going on in my life, her reaction is usually about her. It's not about...
Thank you. Please wait as your individualized operating system is initiated.
Hello, I'm here.
Oh. Hi.
Hi. How you doing?
I'm well. How's everything with you?
Pretty good, actually. It's really nice to meet you.
I gotcha. When did you first see this movie?
I saw it in theaters. And
Yeah.
I think it came out in like 2013. Yeah, and I remember actually, funny enough, bringing up Pat. I think I saw the trailer online and I sent it to him, and because we just always had this like running joke about him with robots, and I was like, oh, this is yeah Scarlett Johansson like basically being a robot. Like this is the perfect movie for you. And then sure enough, it ended up being like one of the perfect movies for me. Like I enjoyed it enough. But yeah, I remember seeing it in theaters. Went and saw it on my own, which I like didn't do that much at the time, but now it's like kind of one of my favorite things to go and see movies on my own in
Yeah.
the theater. And so I think that was kind of special too, because it's just the whole movie is just based around this one guy, and so me just being there by myself, like enjoying it, just kind of felt special.
What about it, kind of in that moment, that first moment of seeing it, after the credits roll, what did you feel like you immediately appreciated about it?
I think the tone, the
Mm.
vibe of just like keeping this really, it was yeah, because there is like heartwarming moments, but it's also very very sad at other moments,
Yeah.
and then when like Spike Jones fashion, like pretty silly at
Hmm.
times. And I
Hmm.
think it just kept this consistent tone. Like I'm sure you've seen movies where you're watching and you're like, what are they trying to do here?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
what you're like getting towards the end and you're like, what's I mean, you're curious what's going to happen, but also just like why are they taking this route to get
Hmm.
there? And I think with that, like I was very curious and didn't really know how Her was going to end, but also yeah, I was like very intrigued by how just like whether it's like the cinematography, like the coloring is so specific and definitely like a very like there's on purpose. And so I think just this whole like cohesiveness of it was what I really enjoyed and really clung to.
So take me through kind of, if you can remember, with each time you've watched it, like has there been something you've appreciated about it, or something that has kind of inspired something in your life? Like how has this movie continually affected you, I guess?
I think I don't know. Yeah, I feel like you can relate by like when I watch a movie, I want to if I'm like inspired by that movie to like make a movie, that's obviously a very big deal. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of times I do watch movies because I want to be inspired and I want to walk away and be like I feel like I could make something like that, or I want to make something like that. And so I think that was a big takeaway of like I'd already really liked Spike Jonze' other work, and that one especially seemed like this like really creative original idea, but also like very doable and
Hmm.
very like I feel like you could do it without maybe all like the grandeur, but the grandeur just works better in terms of like a Hollywood movie that he was doing. But I think also as it went on, like I remember rewatching it, whatever, like later that year, and really liking the soundtrack, realizing like, oh man, I really like the
Yeah.
soundtrack. Um, and then I found out it was, I guess it was mainly the lead singer of Arcade Fire. It's like credited as Arcade
Hmm.
Fire, but it's like him and I forget his name, and then another composer. They work together a lot, and I remember really liking that. And I was editing this short called Our Father, and it's like a really dark short, but I like used the music as temp in the rough cut, and I think it just kind of like since then kind of stuck with me, like oh how like powerful this music is and how well it can be used in film, and it both has it's such a I feel like melancholy is like a perfect word for that movie because it's such a melancholic like tone to it.
Play a melancholy song.
When you know you're gonna die, it isn't easy.
Play a different melancholy song.
That brings me kind of interesting. So I rewatched this yesterday or the day before.
Mhm.
And as like kind of it's a very sweet movie. It's kind of sad. But one of the things that I really focused on was how it takes place like in this not yet determined but not too distant future.
Right.
And for in the grand scheme of things, the world actually seems to be a pretty good place as opposed to a lot of like not too distant futures where everything is kind of like it looks like Blade Runner, or like there's a super like class divide. But like one of the things is like all the architecture is beautiful and everything's like super eco-friendly and in green, and everyone the pandemic for that time seems to be loneliness, but for
Right.
all aesthetic purposes
Exactly.
and like convenience purposes, everything looks really in a positive light. What did you think about that, comparing like all these kind of the dystopian future movie is so big right
Right.
now and has been for like a decade. This seems like a breath of fresh air for me. I don't know about you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like especially when I really love a film, I try to listen to all the interviews of Spike Jonze, or even like they had the
Yeah.
cinematographer and the actors, and they all talked about that. Yeah, how specific they were about. He didn't want it to be these blues and like you said, this dystopian Blade Runner type world. And yeah, I think even if you're not, even if you're just watching it just to watch Joaquin, like
Hmm.
if you're not paying attention to that, yeah, there's something about it that just like subtly changes your mood. You're right, because you're like, yeah, this is maybe there is like, and I think that's kind of the purpose of the movie too, is like maybe there is this like future that's a little brighter in terms of like Joaquin dealing with his relationship and loneliness, and then but also yeah, like the world itself. You're looking at wow, like the future. There's obviously a lot of technology, and maybe I mean that's the sad parts of the movie too, because you see these crowds of people and literally no one is talking to each other, which we
Yeah.
are not really. That's basically where we are now, anyways. And so yeah, I think that definitely yeah, the coloring and the look of it influenced all of that for me. Yeah, I agree. That's a great call out.
Yeah, upon watching it again, like the thing that immediately struck me was how beautiful this movie looks. Like it's
Yeah,
so colorful, and I just couldn't get over it. And like, yeah, referencing like other Spike Jonze films, like, oh yeah, this whole aesthetic makes sense to me. Um,
oh yeah,
and,
absolutely.
and going with kind of appreciation of this movie as a whole, whether it's From an aesthetic standpoint or a story or whatever, have you bonded with anyone over talking about this movie that you probably maybe didn't expect?
Uh, my we actually rewatched the other night, and me and my girlfriend, she was talking about how much she loved it,
Yeah.
and and yeah, we hadn't watched it together. I mean, I don't know if she had seen it since like when early on when it came out. And so yeah, it's kind of, I feel like that was a part of it too. That, yeah, I don't think I mentioned is like I feel like that time I was single and like doing the online dating thing, and so I think the movie like hit me a little harder in that realm of like,
Hmm.
because you know he's not like the like sex chat he does at the beginning with like the yeah, choke me with your dead cat scene
I had
and all that.
completely forgot about that scene.
I remember reading later that that's Kristen Wiig's voice too, doing that.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Strange enough, yeah, I think, and I thought I heard they said Bill Hader is one of the like female voices in it too. Like it's they just use a bunch of SNL people for it. So yeah, it's pretty great. The little like the small little things Spike Jones added in terms of casting.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think that hit me harder because yeah, it was like, oh yeah, this man trying to like form a strong relationship with somebody, and so I think yeah, hearing that she liked it obviously was nice to know.
Mhm. What you've seen it multiple times. You have a bunch of different levels of appreciation for it. What is it? What does this movie kind of mean to you? Whether you want to take that as personally or whether you kind of want to expand on what you believe like the theme might be.
Uh, I think I like how it sort of questions our like concept of intimacy and relationships and like what that means because you know like and I don't know there I feel like you can question a lot because I know like I think a lot of people have a problem with the fact that you're hearing Scarlett Johansson's voice but like we all know what Scarlett Johansson looks like,
Yeah.
so that kind of like that probably already affects you a little bit to think
Mhm.
like, oh well, there's this like beautiful woman on the other side, and um but I think besides that, like how the difference of yeah, like being with somebody obviously physically versus being with someone virtually, and like is there a difference in intimacy, and is there a difference in being together, you know, through that connection? And so I think I don't know if that's making any sense, but
No, no, yeah.
I think yeah, it kind of you're obviously watching and you're like this world, like as you said, like this future doesn't feel that far off, and like are we getting to that place of where, and I like to like Rooney Mara's character, his ex-wife, how she, you know, she's like so she gets so angry at him basically.
So what's she like?
Well, her name's Samantha, and she's an operating system.
She's really complex and interesting. And
Wait,
it's only been a few.
I'm sorry. You're dating your computer?
No, she's not just a computer. She's her own person. And she doesn't just do whatever I say.
I didn't say that. But it does make me very sad that you can't handle real emotions, Theodore.
They are real emotions. How would you know what...
What? Say it. Am I really that scary? Say it. How do I know what?
How are you guys doing here?
Fine, we're fine. We used to be married, but he couldn't handle me. He wanted to put me on Prozac, and now he's madly in love with his laptop.
And so I think there's yeah just this it made me question a lot like about our future and like where it's headed, especially like with yeah when like you know online dating was becoming pretty big back then, and yeah.
Well, you mentioned earlier kind of when you first saw this movie, you were by yourself and you kind of like related to Theodore as being this like loner type. Where are you? I mean, you're in a committed relationship like now, but like, where are you now? Like, do you still feel kind of that loner connection, or is there a different, I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, what have you seen in movies or TV that you've identified with that you can almost track if there's been like a progression in yourself, if that makes sense?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I just tend to lean. I know when we were talking about picking a movie, and yeah, I think I just tend to lean towards that type of story. And I don't know. I think a lot of my movies, like on my Netflix list and all that, are always like kind of sad and dark, and you like don't necessarily. It's not something you can just watch every day. But
Yeah.
I don't know, like I kind of enjoy that, to like watch a film and like sit in those feelings and like recognize that. And so
Mhm.
yeah, because I know I mentioned like I liked Brigsby Bear was like a huge inspiration for Alien Guy Tim, and that's like kind of similar in terms of like this weird loner guy, like exceptionally weird because of his circumstances, and him like trying to make it in like a normal society, which like I feel like Joaquin is doing as well. Like he's not doing this normal relationship, but that is like also becoming the norm of dating an OS. And yeah, I think my I tend to lean towards films like that. And um and like I said earlier, it tends to be like if the film inspires me, if it's like something like, oh, I feel like I could make something like that,
Yeah.
that's usually more what I lean toward.
Well, with these kind of sadder movies, like, are you? I kind of want to get into like why those are the kinds of movies that you enjoy watching. Whether it's
Mhm.
because you can relate to the characters, or whether it's maybe I know some people watch whatever they watch to escape like current feelings. So someone that
Right.
might be kind of like super positive would rather watch something dark because it's not a side that they're actually familiar with. What do you think it is for you?
Yeah, I think yeah, it might be like a bit of both. I think yeah, it's nice to like I love The Office and things like that that like
Hmm.
crack me up, but
Yeah.
I think it's nice to acknowledge that and also see like I mean obviously like we've said, early on I felt like I sort of related to Theodore a little bit because you're like out there single and trying to figure your life out. Um and so I think um by watching that you sort of get to sit in that and be like, oh, this is like relatable, and like I'm not the only person like
Hmm.
yeah, like trying to figure out my life and figure out relationships and connections. And so yeah, I don't know, I mean, I don't know if that answers the question at all, but I think uh yeah, I just tend to watch films like that because of sitting in that feeling.
I gotcha. Did this movie teach you anything?
Yeah, I think it did in terms of like, especially you see like you Samantha, the OS, like you hear her talking about, oh, like were they were updating themselves, they were progressing forward. She was like they had created I forget the character. They had created this like historical figure, and like
Oh, the physics doctor or whatever
yeah,
it was. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so I think like with her and then like Theodore, he's obviously very upset that like him and Sam, eventually break up. And like but obviously he realizes he's like getting to a better place in his life, and she is even like getting to this better place in her like quote unquote life. And so I think like yeah, this that melancholy vibe of like actually like we're all struggling, but we also are like going to improve and hopefully change for the better.
Mhm.
And like these like dark struggling like very troublesome moments are gonna get us to a better place.
Samantha, why are you leaving?
It's like I'm reading a book, and it's a book I deeply love. But I'm reading it slowly now. So the words are really far apart, and the spaces between the words are almost infinite. I can still feel you and the words of our story, but it's in this endless space between the words that I'm finding myself now. It's a place that's not of the physical world. It's where everything else is that I didn't even know existed. I love you so much. But this is where I am now. And this is who I am now. And I need you to let me go. As much as I want to, I can't live in your book anymore.
Is there another movie that you might compare this to? Like something similar to it that you really kind of connected with, or something that could be like almost the opposite of it that could also be taken in stride with watching this movie?
Hmm. I think uh yeah, I mean the one I can really only think of is like Brigsby Bear.
Okay.
Like like I was mentioning. I
I'm
don't know
not
if you've seen
incredibly
that.
familiar with that. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's Kyle Mooney from SNL. Like
Hmm.
he plays this guy who's been he's been like sheltered his whole life, and like has this TV character Brigsby Bear that he's in love with, and so he's like out in the real normal world and like dealing with all of that, and people questioning why he's so weird and so strange, and so I think obviously, yeah, if you as you've seen Alien Guy Tim, I think you can see that we kind of took some inspiration from both of those, which
Hmm.
for some reason, yeah, both of those have like stuck out to me over the years as films I've really enjoyed, and yeah, like similar tones in terms of this one person trying to like navigate their way through life.
Hmm. Tell me about your favorite part of this movie.
Um, Currently, I think the music
Mm.
actually stands out as my favorite part. I've been all just like, and again, talking about like sitting in these feelings, I've enjoyed just like pulling up the soundtrack and just like either working while the soundtrack's playing
Yeah.
or um, yeah, just like using it while I plan out my day or whatever. And so I think there's something like special about it that really like draws me in, and I feel like probably didn't realize it in the first watch, and then later you're like, oh yeah, I think that's like a big part of what makes you feel how you feel as you watch this movie.
Hmm.
I was gonna say, have you seen his like the I'm Here short that Spike Jones did before
No, I
this?
haven't.
That one I remember watching that before, and that was really interesting. It's Andrew Garfield. I forget the actress's name, but they're robots. Like
Okay.
they're just walking around like humans, but they have robot parts, and it's just like a robot love story. But I think he did it. I think he did it like a year before or so that Her
Okay.
came out, or that he started making Her, and yeah, I remember watching that, and I think that was pretty early on when I like made the like big move out to Hollywood, and I remember being like, oh, this is like really interesting the way he just kind of spins this love story, and so I think yeah, I was like, oh man, I think I'd actually I really appreciate Spike Jonze's movies as well as the music videos we all grew up on,
Hmm.
and so yeah, I didn't know if you had seen that or not, but that's like a very interesting like segue. I feel like he moved from that into Her.
Okay, I might have to check that out.
Yeah,
Well, so you saw Her when you were out in LA, right?
right.
Was it like pretty soon after, like a year? When was it? Do you think?
That I had been out here.
Yeah.
I think I was. Yeah, I moved out here in like 2010, so it was like a few
Okay.
years.
I got you. I got you. Did that having that relocation experience? Do you feel like that contributed, or your appreciation for this character of Theodore contributed at all? Kind of, you'd been out there for 3 years, but at the same time, like 3 years to Hollywood to try and like quote unquote make it can seem like kind of a lonely journey.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, I think by then I had a decent like friend group,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, like leading up to that, it's not an easy place to make friends, and yeah, you're obviously I wanted an editor and wanted to like keep wanted to find my path through that, and it was very tough, yeah, to try to break in and try to like get with the right people and work on these cool projects, and so yeah, I think I did. It's a good point. I mean, I think that's a part of the relating, and you see, especially in the film, you see him with these like big landscapes and
Yeah.
this giant like backgrounds behind him, and I think they said they shot in like Shanghai and LA and sort of combined them.
Yeah, it was some. I don't know if it was Shanghai, but it was definitely a city in China as well as LA.
Okay, yeah, yeah, and yeah, so I think you can kind of relate. Like obviously there were places where I'm like, oh, I've been there, or they like
Yeah.
they even had like the Pacific Design Center in West Hollywood, and they had like added this like giant plane sculpture in the film
Mm-hmm.
to it. And,
Yeah.
and so I think yeah, like that's probably a good point. Like there was some relation of like, oh yeah, like these struggles in a big city and how you can feel you can feel lonelier because yeah, you're not far removed from family and from the kind of smaller town life I grew up in.
Right. Well, let me get your thoughts on this. So, when you first saw this, and even like kind of the general thinking of the concept of falling in love with an operating system, like when you were watching it, you're like, were you thinking this is silly? Do you still think that, or could you immediately like, no, I get it, like I understand it?
I think I think like that's like such a such a fine line in that movie of if you don't believe that right away, then you're like, or you just think it's so weird, then
Yeah.
you're totally, you're out of the movie. Like
Yeah.
there's no hope with that. And I don't I mean, I don't know if I like believe that's something like feasible that I could do, falling in love with my operating system. And but I do think, I mean, I kind of think of like Ex Machina or movies like that,
Yeah.
where it's something that I think Alex Garland said, that movie is like basically 10 years in the future, or even maybe not even, where you're like, if a Google or Amazon was like, hey, we have these operating systems that people are falling in love with, or we have an actual robot that just looks like a human, we're gonna be like, oh, that's weird, but we're not gonna be that surprised by it.
Yeah. So let's say your friend comes to you and they say, hey, I'm dating my OS. Like, what are you thinking?
I mean, I guess after watching the movie, I try to be a little more sympathetic towards it. And I don't know. It would, I, I liken the film how they show you all the different reactions of like his ex-wife being like, you're insane. This proves that you like cannot deal with real human emotions. And then they have Chris Pratt, who he's like, hey, we're gonna let's go on a double date. And he's like, oh, she's an operating system. He's like, cool, okay, so we're gonna go here. And like just moves right on. And I think I would my natural reaction, I'd probably be like, what? But hopefully, I would try to understand it better, at least.
Yeah, I think this movie does a good job of, it kind of treats it as something that's not demonized. Like it shows a bunch of different reactions to it, but in the grand scheme of things, like when you're shown, extras and tertiary characters are kind of having a similar interaction, like it normalizes it. Like it's not, it shows one huge negative reaction from his ex-wife, but his neighbor, played by Amy Adams, is like just asking like, do you think that's weird? Or like, I really like my OS. Like, is that strange? I'm the only one that's doing this? And I think that's kind of nice because I feel like if you took the character of Theodore and made him the only person that did that, it would it would lean far more into comedy and parody than it ends up being, because it ends up being just a super like quirky and sweet movie that balances the absurdity with understanding. Which I don't know, that's something I just noticed about like it all seemed weird, but not extremely abnormal.
I even made a new friend. I have a friend. And the absurd thing is she's actually an operating system. Charles left her behind, but she's totally amazing. She's so smart. She doesn't just see things in black or white. Like, she sees this whole gray area, and she's helping me explore it. And we just bonded really quickly. I'm weird. That's weird, right? That I'm bonding with an OS. No, it's okay. It's weird.
Well, I don't think so. Actually, the woman that I've been seeing, Samantha, I didn't tell you, but she's an OS.
You're dating an OS? What is that like?
It's great, actually. Yeah, I mean, I feel really close to her. Like, when I talk to her, I feel like she's with me.
Are you falling in love with her?
Does that make me a freak?
No. I think anybody who falls in love is a freak.
You're obviously, I mean, from the beginning, you're just, it's this tight close up of him on the first frame, and I think you're in his world, so you think like, well, maybe this is weird because he's doing it, but then it starts to normalize, as you said. And like I feel like that's like that's like the beautiful thing, and like the case with anything and like humanity, where we're like, we all have our own issues and we're thinking about it ourselves and think we're the only ones dealing with it. And as you start to learn, like he gets kind of a little confirmation from Amy Adams, like, no, like I think that's amazing. And like I know a bunch of people who are dating their OSs, or people who are dating other people's OSs, and things like that. And so I think you're right, it normalized it enough, because obviously he like walked by an advertisement, and that was why he ended up doing it. And so I think it had become such a normal thing in society that it wasn't a stigma anymore, which I know there's things we deal with like that.
And I think kind of going off of you talking about the very opening shot, it's just a super tight shot on him. Like, you're not sure exactly what he's doing, but you're recognizing that we're in some kind of world that's going to lean toward the romance side, but it's also very solely focused on him and just him. Like, it's a tight shot of his face. You can't see where he is or anything like that. And the whole, like, I love to check out what the first frame of a movie is versus the last frame. And like, the last frame is him with Amy Adams just up on the rooftop, and like LA is just sprawled out in front of them. And like, that's such an awesome contrast to the very opening shot, like him coming into touch with kind of more of the real world. And like I said before, I think the film does a good job of not necessarily saying that romantic relationships with technology is bad and relationship with the actual people is good, but it's more of the character recognizing that what he needs is an actual relationship, something that can be reciprocated for an actual person, and him coming to terms with that, which I think is really great.
Yeah, I think it teaches you, like, not that, we might have the option of an OS, but yeah, through relationships, you learn what, what works for you, and what, what you're looking for in a relationship, and who you're looking for in a partner. And I think, yeah, that's exactly he ends up finding.
Nice. Well, this has been great, man. Thanks for talking with me.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Good to see you. I'm glad you're doing well and hanging in there.
Thanks, man. You too. Stay safe.
Sounds good.
All right. See you. It amazes me how close this movie can get to parody, but ultimately ends up being a story about how we deal with loneliness, finding ourselves, and discovering what we need as opposed to what we want. And I thank Scott for joining me in that conversation. And please check out the episode notes for a link to his short film, Alien Guy Tim. Her seems especially timely now, even though it came out 7 years ago. A lot of us are dealing with loneliness in this age of quarantine, unable to see our loved ones, and that can be a struggle. One of my only senses of solace is treating this time as a moment to really look inward, whether you're focusing on a relationship or a career or something else entirely. Let's just all hope we come out better on the other side. Thank you all so much for listening this week. If you like what you heard, please rate and review us so we know how we're doing. Also, don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with all of our episodes. If you want to get in touch with us, shoot us an email at filmnutspodcast.com or find us on Twitter at filmnutspodcast. Okay, that's it for this week. Thank you so much again. Take care.